Hey everyone, and welcome to Soul Talks. This is Kenlin and Jean Key 10. Here we are on the eve of Christmas in the Yuletide season, really bringing through this sense of holiness. And it's fitting that we've stepped into Jean Key 10, which is the Jean Key in the ring of humanity. There are a handful, let's look at this, 1, 2, 3, 6 gene keys in the ring of humanity, what it means to be human on the mythic journey of humanity. I think that's appropriate for now because we're celebrating in the Western culture this notion of divinity coming into form as a human being to live on the earth as love, as the divine. It is the province of heaven on earth. To be truly human, anthropos, is to embody the God self in our humanity. And so we are now in the ring of humanity. And let's explore what that means. Now, Richard Rudd says about this ring of humanity that it's a complex codon ring. Of course it is, because it has to do with our embodiment of our divinity. And it says these 6 gene keys encapsulate all the mythic elements of which it means to be human. And so here we go. I wanted to presence this at the outset. Wounded from the beginning, gene key 25. You must do battle with your shadow, gene key 38. Overcome the limitations of your mind, gene key 17. Surrender your need to control life, gene key 21. And find your true self, gene key 10, before you can awaken, gene key 51. So that's the mythic human story inside the codon ring of humanity, the codes that are in our DNA of what it means to be human. So here we're going to start with gene key 10. And gene key 10 is the shadow of self-obsession. And we all are self-obsessed. So there's no pointing fingers here. We're all self-obsessed. The gift of naturalness and the Siddhi of being. So I love this. The phrase that Gene Key 10, that opens up Gene Key 10, is called being at ease. So of course, when we start off on our path, we are not at ease. We are not at ease with who we are. We are born into conditioning. We are this pure light born into a family dynamic in which we are conditioned about who we are, what we think about ourselves, and how we feel about ourselves. I was just with a cousin who I noticed was not in her body at 21 years old. Remember those days where you didn't feel comfortable being in your own body, where you didn't feel like you could even say hi to other relatives? There was such incredible unworthiness in the field. That's how I felt it, because that's how I remembered it in myself. And this is the pathway of self-love. And so an interesting pathway of self-love, we go from self-obsession to real self-love. And so people here with this gene key in their life work are here to teach people about self-love. How do we come home to who and what we truly are? How do we really embrace ourselves? Well, the problem is that we have a culture that is hooked on the shadow, that we're hooked on our not self, and we're trying to find our way through, but we're trying to find our way through external validation. And this is the Instagram culture, how I look, how my life looks to others, but it's hollow. And even when we embrace spirituality, we still embrace our self-expression, our self-obsession. Self-expression is great. And that's our way through. But self-obsession is something that's even present inside of our spiritual path. And I remember that I used to call it navel gazing. In my 30s, when I started my spiritual path, I felt like I was such a navel gazer. And, I grew up with a mother who said that any kind of work on myself was selfish. And so there was this tendency to not really own that I was doing work on myself, until I quote my brain guy very often, who said, in order to not be a self, you have to be a self. You can't skip being a self. You can't skip narcissism, in other words. And in fact, in the spiral dynamics, it's actually a level of development that we start off narcissistically, and then we get related to other people as we ascend in our spiritual growth, in our personal growth, really, that we start to get related to others. We have a stronger sense of core and of who and what we really are, which then allows us to let go of identity. And that's the pathway. So let's explore this a little bit to really understand, and maybe even to cut ourselves some slack in terms of the self-obsession we may have on our spiritual path. It's a natural part of it. You can't skip it. Seeking is self-obsessive, and yet seeking will get you to the place of the end of self-obsession if you take it all the way through. And that's really what happened to me when I got tired of navel gazing. And it feels like it was a little bit of a spiral. It didn't just end. There's still parts of myself that I'm curious to know who and what I am, but there's more of myself now who is in service, who's using my gifts. Now I'm honed in to what my gifts are so that I can use them in service to others. So there's this moment when we begin on the path that we are super curious about who we incarnated as. How did we do that? Who am I? What's my template? What's my Enneagram number? What's my sun sign? What's my rising sign? What are my transits? What is my natal chart? What's all the different distinctions? Who am I? And why am I here? That's self-obsessive. And I think that's the self-obsession that can lead us into the gift of naturalness. Self-obsession can also be a denial. Remember, the gene keys talk about a polarity. So on one end, it's this narcissism where you can't see anyone other than yourself. Everything in life is filtered through you. And on another hand, the opposite is the denial of that. So we're kind of caught. It's like the shadow of vanity. No matter if you think you're avoiding vanity, you're actually vain because you don't see that you're not avoiding vanity. So the shadows always get you, which is why we acknowledge, accept, and embrace. And then we can move through the shadow frequency. And it becomes something that we can smile at and something that we can laugh about, rather than something that controls us, rather than the need to post on Instagram looking beautiful and perfect because you only want people to see you in a positive light and reflect back to you that you're worthy. That's what's really going on in our idealized culture. And it's happening at all levels of low level, just completely obvious that that's what's trying to happen. And also at levels within the spiritual community, because everybody is at whatever worldview they're at. And so this transmission, what I want you to listen for is how to upgrade your worldview, because we're all in this ring of humanity. And as the Gene Key said, we're here to find our true self. That's Gene Key 10. That's the pathway. Once we get present to our wound, We do battle with our shadows. We overcome the limitations of our mind. We surrender to the need to control. And then we start to find our true self. All of that is the not self, right? All that control, the wound, the shadows, the limitations, they're all the not self. And we're peeling them off and we're peeling them off. And we peel them off through this pathway of focusing on ourselves. It really can't be any other way. There's no bypass out of it. So in that way, my mother was wrong. It actually was healthy to focus on myself. And I understand how it occurred. But there's a point where we have to really embrace that selfishness, that focus on ourselves. And we have to discover our own uniqueness. And so at the level of self-obsession, we are trying to fit in. We're not trying to stand out. We're not trying to be ourselves. We're trying to fit in and be like everybody else. And so we wear our hair the same way. We wear our eyebrows the same way. We do all the things the same way. And we don't have our own unique sense of beauty because we're afraid to stand out, because that fear of standing out in that shadow state means that we're not accepted, that we're not loved. We don't have the confidence yet to stand out. And maybe if you're advanced on the spiritual path, this is where you can find yourself. You were, but you're not there anymore. And if you're not there, great, because your frequency then is not contributing to, let's say, the Instagram culture. And so when you deny yourself, let's go back to that self-denial, you also are giving your power away. And this is where Richard Rudd says these people are prime targets for the great world religions, because you give away your authority, because you have this false sense of meekness. And that self-denial does not allow you to recognize the divine within yourself, finding it far easier to project such an authority outside yourself. So you're going to know that when you're doing that, that's actually self-obsession projected out. And your pathway is to own it. Your pathway is to own your unique template. It doesn't mean superiority. It doesn't mean worthiness. It doesn't mean that you're lovable because of that. It just means that you're uniquely you to give a particular medicine, a particular gift through your template. And the path is to discover what that is. And so we go through the path of deconditioning. And I thank the goddess for astrology and for the Enneagram and for all the different systems that help me see myself, because I couldn't see who I really was. And as a result, if I didn't see, I would still be in the illusion of creating a fake sense of self to get the validation of who I am. So when that starts to peel away, when we start to do the work of seeing our template is just a template. It doesn't mean better or worse. It just is it's like a window frame for the light to shine through. We've talked about this in other transmissions. And as that light starts to shine through, then the gift frequency comes online. And that gift frequency, he says, living your own myth. This is where you fully embrace your template. You fully embrace the way that you incarnated, and you really know what you're not. I was listening to Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Giving a Fuck, and of not giving a fuck. And he was talking about how you start to embrace even your shadow, because when you embrace your shadow, the parts of you you don't like, that's true self-acceptance. And I think that's really well said. Self-acceptance and self-love isn't thinking you're super great and you're super awesome. No, it's actually being able to look at your flaws in the face and accept them. Yep. And acknowledge them. Yep, I do that. Have you ever been around a person who acknowledges their shit? It's so refreshing. And it makes me love that person even more. It makes me trust that person because I don't have to see it and show them or see it and hide it from them. They already know. And so there's something that makes me relax. And let's talk about relaxation when they already know. So relaxation is a huge part of naturalness. And what does that mean? You just start to be comfortable in your own skin. You start to feel that you're okay. You're okay here. Yeah, I don't do that really well. And this is where comparison really doesn't fuck you over anymore. You kind of get that, wow, that person who I admire does that super well. That's just not how I do it. I encounter that all the time. I see feminine leaders who I'm just like, wow, that is an amazing expression of that thing or that post or that writing or that communication or that photo, whatever. And I can have a deep appreciation without wanting to be that because I can just know that that's their expression of their template and that I have my own. And I have my own. I really want you to get that. I want you to land for you because we really get to just stop competing with each other in our own minds. That's going to do a lot for this fake Instagram culture where we can now really honor our authenticity, honor the way that the divinity is showing up in us. And so that's a rite of passage for the human. Richard Rudd says, the life of every individual human being is a journey through the frequencies of this 10th gene key. So there's not anyone who doesn't have to live this. So as we accept, we start to relax. You can feel that, right? On your path, the more that you've accepted yourself, the more you're comfortable being in your own skin, the more relaxed you are. And when you're not relaxed, when you're constricted and tense, you can trace it to a place where you get to shine the light of love. What's the part of me that wants to be seen that is not seen right now? So I can pretend, or I can dress it up on the outside, or I can go right into it. And the gene keys offer you the opportunity to go right in. So the gift is naturalness, living your own myth. That's where we're going. That's where we're going generally in the gene keys in our culture. The awakening that really takes place in 2027 is when we start to just live our own myth. Isn't that intensely liberating? It's scary because we're pack people, right? We're like pack animals, and we want everybody to reflect us. That's coming from the old tribal mentality. We're breaking that tribal mentality and opting for a collective consciousness that's elevated, that's going to take the individual, this is the Aries North node, to really making a stand in our particular unique leadership. Not superior, not inferior, just simply the way that spirit is moving through me. And constant learning, right? It's that figure 8, constant learning. I'm not arrived. Why would I want to be arrived? That's so boring. Really, it's a dynamic process of constantly learning, constantly seeing our shadow, constantly giving out, living our own myth. So this is individuation, this is part of the naturalness, is that we start to individuate. I claim that this happens, particularly if it hasn't happened before, it happens when you turn 50. You have this huge opportunity to individuate, to really accept yourself as who you are. And really, it's funny because we're claiming who you are, because then when we get to the Siddhi level, we're letting go of that. But you can't let go of that until you know who you are. So this naturalness in your life has several phases that the Gene Keys talks about as the deepening process with coming into your true self. And it's really the path of personal growth. And every single one of us are on it. And then we move into the Siddhi. And the Siddhi is another flavor of enlightenment. We've said this at all the Gene Keys. They represent the 64 flavors of enlightenment. And this flavor is the flavor of beingness. Now, beingness in the Gene Keys, in the world of enlightenment, is pure beingness. It is truly dropping the sense of a particularity in favor of this I am consciousness. I am that I am. I am not my name. I am not my personality. I am not my parents. I'm not my conditioning. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my thoughts. I am that I am. And so Nisargadatta wrote the book, Neti Neti. I am that, not this, not that. It's like to know what you are, we can only point to what we are not. We are not our conditioning. We are not our personality. We are the I am, living as this. Byron Katie says, I appear now as this. Isn't that a glorious statement? I appear now as this. Because who will I appear next as? And also keeping in mind that our timeline is long, that these are just appearances in form for a brief amount of time. The flicker in this flame inside of us, each individual person and the collective of humanity. So the I is just this isness. And this isness has a paradox. And this is where we really have to leave the land of the mind, because this paradox is the isness and the being here. That is really what Yeshua in this season of honoring the light of Christ is about. It's about the both and. The knowing that I am the I am, and there's nothing to do, and there's no one to be. And I have to say the words divine laziness, because I know some of you have used that word, like the divine laziness. There is nothing to do. And yet, on the other hand, there's everything to do, the Bodhisattva path. And it's a both and. And how do we live that both and? Well, we just live it. We just live it. And we're aware of who is the one living this life. Who is the one breathing you? And so inside of Leela, the divine play, here we are playing the roles as characters of us. Whenever I start a transmission or I do any kind of live event, I go through this kind of mantra. I'm not my name. I'm not my gender. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my personality. I am a teacher. It makes it a stand for me. It's an invention of who I get to be and the current that gets to run through me. And I invite you to take that on. Play with it. Watch. Who is the you getting invested in the argument? Who is the you merging with the circumstances of your life? Who is the witness of the witness even? It's really all a very fascinating play. And we are actors in this play in the ring of humanity. For whatever reason, we said, yep, we are going to be a part of this divine experiment, to be human, to be God. So with that, I wish you an incredibly beautiful holiday season with this message to really tap into that inner light, the inner light of your uniqueness, and begin to bring love and acceptance to it. And notice that as you do that, you have more love and acceptance for others, because we're all just playing our part. So as we gather all the positive energy that we have generated here, we dedicate it to the merits. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts. Namaste.